Hi, everyone. This is Rita.desnoyers Garcia of Becoming Awake, the Calm Mom Alliance Facebook group, and of course, Becoming Awake YouTube channel. And we are continuing our series of women helping women with my friend Ashley Jangro. So I'm just going to read from her bio as usual, and we're going to get going. Okay. So Ashley Jangro helps moms whose kids are struggling with mental health have the tools to help their kids feel better. Isn't that great? She is a certified life coach, a former teacher, and a mom and stepmom of 6 kids. God bless you. To find out more, visit her website at ashleyjangro.com. And she's got a YouTube channel as well. So I expect you to subscribe to that, Ashley too. And then she's got a free online community called the Mom Squad. I love that name, by the way. That's a great name. We'll give you all those links. And also you can download her free guide, 3 questions to ask your kids daily to improve their mental health. I'm dying to look at that. I think that's really going to be helpful. And she has an offer of a 12-week one-on-one coaching program called Mentally Strong Mom, where you help moms gain the tools they need to help their kids feel better. I think we all want that. Well, welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
So there's a lot in your bio. So I would love to start with how did you discover this? How did you get started? Did this come from your own life? Give us the skinny.
Absolutely. So, and you and I have kind of talked a little bit about this, but I'll just explain that I have my biological kids are 3 daughters. And so I knew when they were very young that this, there was going to be some stuff when they became teenagers. So when my daughter hit 12 years old, she started really struggling with her mental health. She was suffering from depression and anxiety. Later, we found out there was a lot to do with undiagnosed ADHD there, which I am also diagnosed with. And I just was really struggling to get her help. I could see what she was struggling with. I knew that she needed help. I tried everything that I could to get her the support that she needed, but I felt like I kept hitting a brick wall. So I would try for therapy, but there was, 6-month wait lists for adolescent therapists. And I would try programs and I would try, we would buy workbooks and we'd work through it. We'd try meditating together. We'd try all these different things. And it just felt like, I think I reached a point where I was like, well, this is just what we have for ourselves for the teenagers. And this is just what we're going to deal with. And at some point I had been teaching at the time I taught at their school. And I saw this need all over. I looked at their friends and I was like, kids are struggling so much with anxiety and depression right now. And so I decided to go back to school to get my degree in counseling. And I was, I made it almost all the way through. I think I still have 6 credits left of the degree when the pandemic hit and completely shut down my internship. During that time, I had run across this concept of life coaching. I had used some life coaches as resources for some of the papers I was writing, and I was just really drawn to it. It was very solution focused. Future focused, as opposed to a lot of what I learned in therapy, which kept people looking back at their pasts and kept them in this, there's something wrong with you. And I was just so drawn to this. So I actually started life coaching as a client to address 2 different areas in my life. One was weight loss and one was my relationship with alcohol. I wanted to stop drinking as much as I was drinking and kind of felt powerless to do that on my own. And it was really incredible because I very quickly learned these tools that completely shifted my life. I learned how to manage my emotions. I learned how to become aware of my thoughts, that my thoughts created my emotions. And as I became aware of them, that I could shift my perspective to see things differently. You're nodding. You probably remember when you experienced that shift in your own life too. It changed everything. It changed how I approached problems. It changed how I talked to my kids about things. And it was really amazing because I started noticing a shift in my daughter's mental health. It was about 6 months after I started that she came to me and said, I think I don't need to be on antidepressants anymore. And it had so much to do with how she was seeing the world differently. And I did not ever try to teach her these skills. I didn't try to, it was for me, it was about me. But as I started showing up differently, her thinking started shifting. And I understood that a lot later as I learned more about our brains and about mirror neurons and about, how our kids are impacted. But it just really blew my mind. And so that at the time I was coaching teenagers, I had some really great success with coaching teens how to manage emotions around anxiety. And I shifted at that point I started thinking, you know what, if we can get these tools in the hands of moms, if kids are being raised knowing how to process and allow emotions, if kids are raised knowing that their emotions are not emergencies, knowing that their thoughts are not facts.
I love that.
And that they can become aware of their thinking and then shift their perspective. We'd live in a different world.
Absolutely. I love what you just said. Our emotions are not emergencies. Wow. I love that. I love that. I think
and that's
I need
something
to tattoo that to the inside of my eyelids. But
it's something I remind myself of all the time when I have a really intense emotion. I'm like, wait, my body's trying to tell me this is an emergency. It's trying to tell me there's a problem out there in the world that needs to be fixed. And that's not even the case. That's not even necessarily the case.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the teachers that I follow, Robert Scheinfeld, talks a lot about emotions they're just stimulus in your body. They're just literally you're feeling this energy in your body. That's all it is. We name it, we call it something. We even say if it feels good or not. And then based on that, we'll label it something, but it's really just energy in your body.
Yeah.
So, I love that. Emotions are not emergencies.
Emotions are not, those are the two first concepts that we really cover in Mentally Strong Moms is emotions are not emergencies and thoughts are not facts.
Yes.
And those two were so huge for me to learn because I don't think I learned that as a child. If there's an intense, uncomfortable emotion, sensation in my body, something's gone wrong and it needs to be fixed.
Yeah. And by the way, don't feel it.
Right.
Press it down.
Right. Or figure out some way to avoid it, figure out a way to ignore it, or have a big reaction to it. So you get that cathartic feeling. You get that dopamine rush from reacting to it. That's one of the things I teach. We have 4 choices when it comes to emotion. We can react, we can resist it, we can avoid it, or we can just allow it. Absolutely. It's really uncomfortable.
When you first do it, especially, you're like, oh, I've had some emotions where I feel like I'm in labor.
Yeah.
Where I'm literally leaning on the bed going, using my the yoga breath and I'm like, holy crap, I'm in labor with an emotion.
And you know what's so amazing about that process though? Because I was doing my degree in counseling, I try to base everything on research-backed studies. So I read this study that was done not too long ago, that when we do that, when we allow the emotion and breathe into it and just let it be in our body, they typically last about 90 seconds. And it's the average was 30 seconds to 5 minutes, but generally 90 seconds. And I thought that blew my mind because I thought, how many times have I made a poor decision or done something I later regret? Even if it's something I'm doing to avoid the emotion, like overeating or over drinking or something. How many times have I done something I'll later regret to keep myself from having to feel something for a minute and a half?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that doesn't mean I won't have to come back to it and feel it again, but a minute and a half, I can do that.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm thinking if you're a mom, you've had to withstand so much more for longer periods of time.
Yes.
So you can do this.
Many
we've all
times.
had to. We've all gone through things that were uncomfortable for more than 90 seconds. So
yes.
Yeah. I know my chiropractor would say, he does a kind of chiropractic where you're emoting a lot, just stuff comes up. And I would say, wow, this thing came up, but I don't even have a story with it. And he's like, good, because the story will just keep it going. So just, don't attach a story to it. Just feel it and let it come out. It's
just acknowledge it's just a sensation in my body and I can handle that.
Yeah.
Well, I always talk about with moms, one of the most painful things we have to do is watch our kids experience pain.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
It's a whole other level, right?
Yeah.
And it could be pain, I wore the wrong clothes and I'm embarrassed at school today. That one gets me all the time. And I try I often teach like the best thing we can give to our kids is help them learn that a negative emotion is not an emergency, that it's okay, that it's uncomfortable but tolerable. And that's so hard as moms because it means whatever they're feeling, we're feeling it like 10 times or something.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, absolutely. I'm so glad you're bringing this up because I've done a lot of changing in my life around my parenting and myself, but still I've noticed like if my kid is not like 100% happy, in the back of my mind, I'm going, how are you doing? How's it going? Okay. And I can see her, she doesn't want to talk about it or whatever, and I'll go, okay. And I'll kiss her on the head and I'll walk out of the room and I'll be like, and then I'll have to remember, this is life. People don't feel happy all the time. And to actually have that expectation, whether consciously or unconsciously, I'm not setting her up for success if I think she's supposed to be happy instead of feeling like sometimes she's going to feel kind of shitty sometimes. And that's okay. And I feel I'm cool with me feeling that way. Why not? You know what I mean?
Make it okay for her. But we treat uncomfortable emotions in our kids as a problem.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're like, oh, we need to fix it, which I think is a huge reason for anxiety because kids get in their mind, like, I'm supposed to feel good. So the fact that I don't, they develop an intolerance for negative emotion.
Yes.
Like life's supposed to feel good and it doesn't. So that means something's wrong.
There's something wrong with me. I got to change something. Yeah. Totally get that. And I've become much less of a fixer than I used to be, but I feel that impulse is still there to kind of like, well, maybe I can say something or do something or even, like little things like packaging, right? Like they're opening something up and they're having a hard time. My impulse is to go, just give it to me and I'll
just do it. Yeah.
And now I'm like, well, why don't you just give that,
keep going.
Keep going and see what happens. But every once in a while, I'll be like, here, you just do that.
Well, I used to think that one of the things that I was doing that was like very helpful was instead of fixing, I would brainstorm with them. Like, how can you fix this? And I'm like, I'm such a great parent. They're coming up with their own solution.
Well, I think you are a great parent, but
oh, good. Thanks. And I do still think that. I think that but what I wasn't leaving room for was that like validation piece. I was jumping to like, how can we get rid of this emotion quickly?
Yeah.
But what if we don't need to? What if it's not a problem and we just allow it? And I can say like, wow, you're angry or you're embarrassed. Tell me what that feels like. That's the first of the 3 questions to improve your child's mental health. Tell me what that feels like. Explain what that feels like in your body.
Yeah.
And it's teaching their brains like this feeling is not a threat. It's not a danger.
Yeah.
So it prevents them. It helps, like, as we're teaching their on a brain level, their brains that this is not an emergency, that it's not a problem. They don't shift over into fight or flight or freeze so quickly. They're like, oh, this is awful and it's uncomfortable. It's not going to last that long, but it's not something that needs to be fixed or avoided or ignored.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think kids all over really need that.
Yeah. And it was a huge shift. Sorry, I'm jumping in there. It was a huge shift for me to realize that about anxiety specifically. Like anxiety, we treat it like, I don't want to feel this. And we make, and our anxiety might be this big, but then by making a problem in our brain, we make it like this big all of a sudden. And that's where like, then the panic sets in, like, I shouldn't be feeling this. And it's like, what if you feel it in your body? And I teach this a lot to my kids where we find it and we find the shape of it and we find the color of it. And we stay out of our brains, but we move into our bodies and create that mind-body connection there and describe it. And then it's like, oh, this is uncomfortable, but not unmanageable. And then it's gone. Yeah. And then it doesn't become this big. It stays that size,
Absolutely. I teach an emotional release technique that does exactly that.
Yeah.
You describe it, the shape, the color, the texture, the whole thing.
Yeah. It sounds so weird.
Look at it. I know it sounds weird, but, and some people are like, I'm not individualization. I'm like, just do your best, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like you become the observer of it instead
Yep.
of being overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, you
So
get to be the watcher. I always teach too that you're giving your brain by describing it, you're giving your brain a job. So
yes.
it can't spin out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm like, it might sound silly, but you got to give your brain something to focus on.
Absolutely. Because like
Yeah.
a little puppy, if you leave it
Yeah.
unattended, it will go after the drapes. It will
Yeah.
start eating the shoes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is great. This is wonderful. And what was I going to say? Something about, oh, what do you think about, because I do this sometimes, and then I think, am I jumping the gun, is to say this is normal. Like
Mm.
there are times where my kid is, one of them is feeling a certain way, or, like I have a child who's college age, and I'm like, by the way, just know that when you go to the dorm or you meet a new person or you're traveling, it's okay if it doesn't all go exactly the way you want. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay. You may feel nervous. You may feel lonely. You may feel like you don't know what's going on. And that's all part of your expansion and learning. Just so you know, that's normal. And it doesn't mean anything wrong. It just means here I am doing this new thing I've never done before, and I'm feeling a little stressed about it.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think about that?
I love that. I think that that's huge because I think that, again, like I grew up believing I don't feel good about this. Maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I took the wrong steps because it doesn't feel good. And so I say that all the time, like life's not meant to feel good all the time. I don't know why, but it's not, and it's not going to. And especially when we're doing new things. And I talk to my kids about it a lot on like a brain level, like the thing that's happening, your brain has these motivations to avoid pain, to seek pleasure, and to do everything efficiently. So when you're trying something new, it's going to like throw up all these roadblocks. And wait, like what you said, we put language to it. We call it loneliness or whatever name we give to it. But it's just because it's like your brain is like, this is not efficient. And we have to remain efficient to stay alive. Why are you doing this? So, yeah. So I say that a lot. Like it's normal.
Yeah. And sometimes I do that through story. Like I'll say, when I went to college, the first night I was there, all my roommates and I were all crying alone in our beds the first night. We were all so stressed.
Yeah.
And then after a while, after we realized we were all crying, we got to start laughing, and I kept thinking, I kind of knew I wasn't in the wrong place, but I just knew this is really overwhelming. I've never done this before. I'm alone. I'm really alone in terms of leaving my family. This is all new. Everything is new. There's no like, you know what I mean? Like it's the first thing
so fatiguing.
When it's all novel all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't realize like a lot of those first time things you never have to do again. And then you will have a routine and you'll get accustomed to it. And, but there was a part of me that's just like, this is so wrong. I don't know if I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think stop there. Like,
I have a client I have a client that I worked with that she kept changing situations. So she was living at a boarding school and then she moved back home and she got a new job and now she's traveling the world. And she told me right before she left for her last trip, like I'm going to remember now that those first couple of weeks, I'm not going to like it. And that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean I won't start liking it. I just have to get used to it.
Absolutely. I remember I did my junior year in England, which you would think is no big deal, like same language, right? No. It's the same language, but it's
everything's different. Yeah.
I made a lot of mistakes, a lot of vocabulary mistakes, and just different culture and different expectations. And I remember calling my parents on a phone. They had a payphone in the lobby of the building I lived in. And I called and I heard my father's voice and he sounded so Jersey. It was hilarious because I was used to the British accent. He's like, how you doing?
It.
And I was just like, no one gets my jokes. Not making any friends. And they don't get me, And then I hung up the phone. I was miserable, even though this was like a big dream of mine to do this thing. And it took a good 2 months for me to like make good friends and feel like I belonged and then didn't want to come home. But it took a while for that to happen. And I try to tell those stories to my kids as like, yeah, it may suck. That doesn't mean it's the wrong decision. It just means you're going through a stage.
And imagine if we didn't do things to avoid those emotions that you're just describing, we'd never do anything.
Yeah.
Like we'd have to live small lives, because to do big things, you just have to know those things are going to come up.
And do you think that with the lockdowns and the whole constant perseverating on fear of illness, do you think that's added to kids' nervousness and anxiety and depression during this time?
I try really hard not to like go there in my mind, like have that mentality of like, oh, the world's falling apart. I start to ask myself, like, what are the positive pieces of this? I think that as humans, we can get used to anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it so weird?
I know.
We just can. And so I try to ask myself, like, what are the pieces of this? I know we talked a lot about like the extreme existence of mental health, like of self-diagnoses that are coming from seeing mental health issues on TikTok and on different social media platforms.
Yeah.
And I try to ask myself, like, yes, I could, like, I don't know, fight that, like in my brain, be like, this is such a problem. But I have to ask myself, what are the positives about that? Like, it is positive that people are thinking about their own mental health more. So I think it requires a lot of conversations. Like, how is this impacting you? I'm trying to think of some of the other questions I ask, because I very easily can get into that mentality of like, we need to not have this.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, but we do. It's reality. So now what?
Right. Fighting with reality, as Byron Katie would say, when you fight reality, you're gonna lose 100% of the time.
But only every time.
But only every time, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I know. I love that outlook because it's true. There's what's the statistics, right? Then there's the stories you hear and the, whatever you want to call it, propaganda, the stories or the narratives. And then there's what's actually happening to you in your life.
Right.
So all of this could be happening and you could be living your best life or not. You could be living, maybe you're not your best life, but you're right. I think it comes down to how is it affecting you personally?
Yeah.
And your loved ones. And then how can you make it work for you instead of feeling like you're constantly fighting against it? Because we know when you keep fighting against something, you just emboldened it kind of,
Right. You like give it power over you.
Yeah.
And it's always worth it to step back and be like, why is this? I ask myself these questions all the time. What am I making it mean? A lot of them are from Byron Katie. What am I making it mean? Yeah. Why is it a problem? Like, why does my brain want to make this a problem? And and then so what? Like, if this has this impact on my kids, so what? What's next? What can I do next? Where is my power?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this. I feel like we're very in sync with how we do things. And you add so much more than I haven't thought of because you're another person. So what kinds of people seek you out? And like, can you give us an example of maybe a before and after? Flesh out?
Yeah. So I, like I said, I initially started coaching clients, and a lot of them would be teenagers who struggle with anxiety. So for example, one of the teens I worked with had been having panic attacks for, I think since he was like 10 years old and he was 18, he was having like these debilitating panic attacks on a weekly basis. And we started working together and I asked him a lot of these questions, like, tell me what it feels like. Why does that feel like a problem? And we talked about how he could give his brain a job so he's not spinning out. I have a little acronym that I take kids through, which is STOP. It's STOP, slow down, take control from your brain. You called it a puppy. I think of it as like a 2-year-old with a Sharpie.
Yeah.
Take control, observe what's happening in your body, and then process your emotion by describing it. And he started doing that. And he told me that after I think we've been meeting for like 3 weeks, he said, this is going to sound strange, but he's like, I'm almost excited to have a panic attack so I can use my tools.
Yes.
Yeah. And I kept asking him every week, like, okay, how'd it go? And he's like, I haven't had one. And for 3 months, I'd ask him how to go. I haven't had one. And he finally compared it to like a monster in the closet. If you don't open it up and look at it, it gets bigger and bigger in your brain.
Yeah.
He had the best analogy. He compared it to when he was really into Avengers. He compared it to when Bruce Banner didn't want to become the Hulk, and he was fighting becoming the Hulk, and he'd become the Hulk. But the moment that he was like, oh, the Hulk's fine, Hulk's not a problem, he couldn't become the Hulk anymore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. So he's like, the minute I stopped looking at these things as a problem, they didn't have any power anymore.
Yeah.
And it was really incredible because he started trying things. Like he got back into some sports that he hadn't done for a long time because he was scared that his fear about them would trigger a panic attack. So then when he was like, I can handle panic attacks, I'm going to try this thing.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. I love it.
Yeah. So that is how, like I said, it started. And then I moved into teaching that to moms so they could reinforce that. Cause I can meet with a teenager an hour a week. They are there all the time. Yeah. So I had another client who came to me, her daughter was really struggling with anxiety, and so was mom. So we worked very hard on, not allowing anxiety to be a problem and what she could do in the moment of extreme anxiety. And she did it with her daughter. And what was so amazing about that, it was so different than when I was like trying to learn these things from workbooks. She could watch her daughter. And because she had that like visceral knowledge of the process, she knew what it felt like in her body. She could watch her daughter and walk her daughter through that, knowing if her daughter had reached that point of like truly processing her emotion. And it was so neat because she came back later and she's like, we were both feeling really anxious. They were moving to a new home and they were just feeling really anxious about the whole thing. And she sat there and she and her daughter found the color of their anxiety and they found the shape and they found it, whether it was moving and where the outline of it was in their body. And it was great. They made it through that moment. So that was very cool. But she then came back to me a couple of weeks later and said, I have to show you this. And she showed me a notebook paper where her daughter had written out, what does it look like? All those questions. She had seen like I don't know if it was like the school bully, but like one of the mean kids in the lunchroom at middle school. She saw him starting to lose his temper and she went over to him and she was like, tell me what it looks like. I can see you're feeling anger. And they drew it. They drew his anger.
Wow.
And he completely calmed down. And I like, this is giving me goosebumps to talk about because I thought she did this with her daughter. Her daughter went and took this into her school and was sharing like, I have a tool for this. I know how to help you. And that's the moment where I was like, this could change everything.
Yeah. Why don't they teach this in schools?
I mean, I think back to when I was a teacher and how there's so many things, there's so many expectations, and there's so from an academic perspective, and we're very focused on, growing our kids academically, that there wasn't time for this.
Yeah.
There wasn't space for this. And I think the way so many different families handle these things, sometimes families don't want these emotions validated in their kids. Sometimes they don't, or at least they don't want teachers handling that.
Well, yeah, I absolutely agree that there are a lot of things that we have schools take care of that maybe they shouldn't be taking care of. We should leave to families. But I would think just sort of being able to deal with your own emotions would be a good, I don't know.
I think they're trying, like, I think there's a lot of that, like social emotional learning coming into schools. But it's a very different experience trying to teach this to a classroom of, 25 kids versus like sitting down one-on-one with a child and like, tell me what you're feeling. Tell me how it feels.
Yeah. And maybe they're doing that in the social work, counselors type section of the school, not necessarily the teachers, but when you go to a social worker in the school.
Yeah. And I think back to, and I know we need to wrap up to this, but when I was doing my practicum, I was in the schools and we had a caseload, the counselor I was working with, we had a caseload of 350 kids. So
yikes.
Meeting with them once to make sure I was in a high school and to make sure that they're, getting all the credits they're supposed to was about as much as we could do.
Yeah, no, I'm not like a guidance counselor would not be doing this. Yeah.
Right. But like definitely for the kids who are on that extreme end, it just, I go into the schools and I'm like, wow, there's so much need So much need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then all of the social media stuff, they're constantly seeing all of that
Yeah.
overstimulation, not good for the brain.
This is, I like have such a vision of like when moms as a big group decide like, okay, we need to get involved in this.
Yeah.
Like even when it was like education and then homeschooling started, like moms are so powerful when we start,
We
when we
are
decide.
absolutely, when we decide
Mm,
moms can make a movement for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, so do you have a quick, I mean, we've talked about a lot of things here, and I can think of
Yeah.
like 5 different things that you could say are tips for someone to take from this interview. But what would you, if you were to pick one, what would be like a quick thing that you can do now to help you as a mom and or your child?
Yeah. I think that asking yourself those powerful questions when your brain is starting to spin, stopping and asking yourself, like, why does this feel like a problem? What am I scared of happening? And then stay with that for a moment because it allows you to show up so differently as mom.
Yeah.
And our kids pick up on that. Our kids begin to benefit from that. So the more we can do to calm our own anxieties and our, anytime we're getting worked up, the more we can do for ourselves, the more our kids are going to benefit from that.
Absolutely. Amen to that. So how can people connect with you? I know we've mentioned a few of the things in the bio, but let's just to remind everyone how people can connect with you and what are you offering right now that you think people would really love?
Yeah. So I have a couple different things. We have the Mom Squad on Facebook. So I think I have different URLs you can use so you can go to ashleyjangro.com/mom squad. So that's definitely a way to like, I'm in that group every day. I do lives throughout the week and webinars and same as you are in your group. And also my YouTube channel where I teach a lot of this stuff is ashley.tube. So
Okay.
that's a way. I think I really hope to, if there's any moms listening that are like, this is something, these tools are something I need to learn and implement, then I offer a free strategy call. So you can go to my website and it has a button that says book a call. You can we hop on a call that's free, quick, and really helpful. So that's something
Excellent.
that we can use to connect.
So I just want to say, everyone, you need to connect with Ashley if you've got your own anxiety or ADHD or your children have these issues. Just please contact Ashley. She's just a wealth of information, and it sounds like you make the results. It's not just talking; you're actually have results. So
sometimes it blows my own mind because I think this is such powerful stuff. Thank you so much.
oh, you're welcome. So, all right, guys, until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and also to like and subscribe to Ashley's channel too. So check out all the links below, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.